Zoom recording. All right. So today we are going to be finishing chapter 2, Perek Shtaim, I guess. And we're in the middle. So we ended last week. We're in the middle of this passage where they're trying to explain why things are done during the day, and we're getting the evidence, the proof texts for why certain mitzvot are to be done during the day. And we ended up on breaking the neck of the heifer. So breaking the neck of the heifer, that's Arifat Eglah, is occurs when a person is found dead in a rural area or in the middle of nowhere, basically, and it's not in a town. So the community elders figure out which is the town closest to the dead man, and then they go through this ritual in which they break the neck of a heifer, and it's an atonement sacrifice, really, is what it is, because they're asking God to forgive them because maybe they didn't do something. First of all, to say, we didn't have anything to do with this man's death, and maybe we should have, maybe we should have been involved and been more protective of this individual. So please forgive us. And but again, because it's an atonement, it's an act of atonement, it's similar to other atonement offerings. And we see here, Amri Devei Rabbi Yanai, the school of Rabbi Yanai taught kapara ketiv ba kekodashim. So just like other sacred offerings, which are daytime offerings, which we already learned, here too, this one, which is an atonement offering, is also a daytime offering. Then we go on to the next one, which was the mitzorah, purifying the person with tzara'at. It says right there in the verse, Zot tehiyeh Torah mitzorah biyom taharato. So again, it's a daytime act. And then the nighttime there's certain other mitzvot. And kol alayla kasher l'ktzirat ha'omer. So nighttime, it's okay for harvesting the omer, which you're then going to offer up right after Pesach. The marmar kitzira usfira balayla. As it said in Minachot, this is a different tractate, that the reaping of the omer and the counting of the omer are performed at night. And you can see here in the halacha note says the time for reaping the omer is on the night of the 16th of Nisan. So that's it's right after the first day of Pesach. I mean, we would be observing Pesach on the second day, but in Israel, Pesach is just a one-day holiday, and you would after the first day of Passover, that night you would go out and reap the omer to make the offering. Let me just see, where's the notes here? The halachic authorities discuss at length whether the counting of the omer may be done during the day without the blessing if one forgot to count at night. Some compare the situation to the halacha that although the reaping of the omer barley is supposed to take place at night, if it was reaped by day, it's valid after the fact. Okay. Then we also had, so that was the reaping of the omer, and the counting of the omer, our nighttime mitzvot. And we also had hekter halavim ve'evarim, the burning of the fats and limbs, which are, the animals that are offered up during the day. Some of them require like an olah sacrifice. The whole animal has to be burned up. So, except for the skin, actually, but everything else is just burned up on the altar, and that would be done at night. So it says kol halayla ad haboker. It's all night long is the time for that. And then here we've got the principle. Zeh klal devar shemitzvato bayom kasher kol hayom. This is a principle. Something that is a mitzvah to perform during the day is valid if performed any time during the day. But a lot of times, see, you get a principle like they gave us a whole list of mitzvot, and then they said afterwards, here's the principle. So the assumption is that they didn't include everything in the list. So that's what they wanted. That's what the Gemara asked now. Well, and the way he puts it, as the Mishnah seemingly mentioned all daytime mitzvot explicitly, we had a list. What's it missing? This is the principle are to add what? Okay, I don't know the English there, but if this is the principle, what's missing?
I think the English means the Hebrew phrase is this is the principle. I think that's really quoting.
Yeah, I see. Oh, I see what. Yeah. To yemai. To add what? So what are you adding to it? The Gemara answers, the principle comes to include the arranging of the vessels of frankincense alongside the showbread in the temple, and the removal of those vessels at the end of the week, as the verse doesn't specify the time when these procedures should be performed. So these are daytime mitzvot. Every week there would be 12 loaves of bread put out for in the altar, and then they would be removed and eaten. And these are daytime mitzvot, but they weren't included in that list. Ucha Rabbi Yossi, that's according to Rabbi Yossi. The Tanya Rabbi Yossi Omer, Silek et hayishana shacharit, v'sider et hachadasha arvit, ein bechach klum. Rabbi Yossi said, if one removed the old showbread and frankincense in the morning and arranged the new ones towards the evening, there is nothing wrong with this, because you've got all day long, as it suffices if the changeover is made any time over the course of the same day. The sages, however, maintain that the new ones must be set in place immediately after the old ones had been removed. So, well, okay, let's finish the argument. Uma ani mekayem lifnei Adonai tamid. How do I uphold that which is written in regard to the showbread? It says, he shall set it in order before the Lord continually. It sounds like you've got to always have the bread on those trays. And if you waited until the end of the day, after you'd removed the old ones and you waited for several hours before you put the new one, it sounds like it's not there continually. So his explanation is, or his understanding is, it means only that the table should not be an entire day without the bread. But if there is bread on the table for even part of the day, it's considered as being there continually. So he's not taking it so strictly as every second there's got to be the bread on that table. As long as it's there at some point during the day, it's there during the day. And so every day then there is bread on that altar. Okay, so then what about this? Okay, Devar shemitzvah toba laila kasher kol laila la tu yemai. Same question, but this one is on night. The Gemara gave us a list of examples of mitzvot that can only be done at night. What's missing? Latuye achilat pisachim. It comes to include the eating of the Paschal offering, and this was not according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah taught, and they shall eat the meat on that night. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, it is stated here on that night, and it's stated further on, and I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night. Just as there, when God passed through the land of Egypt, it was until midnight, so too here, the Paschal offering may be eaten only until midnight. The Mishnah asserts that the Paschal offering may be eaten all night. It is not, and it's not in accordance with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Right, so this one is the Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah will put a limit on when that meat had to be eaten, and the Mishnah is suggesting no, the rule is all night long until the start of daybreak, so you'd have more time. This is actually, there's they mentioned it here in the opening Mishnah of the entire Mishnah is in Brachot, is the recitation of the Shema, and there too it reiterates this principle that whenever the sages say you should do something till midnight, that's really just a fence around the Torah, but you've really got all night until daybreak. So here too, the idea is nighttime is basically there's two periods of time: daytime and nighttime, and they bump up against each other. And daytime is until well, the first, it would be daytime starts when the sun comes up over the horizon, but we can even include it all the way earlier to daybreak. And nighttime is considered when the stars come out all the way until that the sun just is right below the horizon, and it's starting to get lighter. All right, so Yasher Koach, that's the end of chapter 2, Hadran Alach Koreh Lemafreya. We will return hopefully one day to study this again, chapter 2, HaKoreh Lemafreya. And now we're going to skip ahead to chapter 3, get to the Mishnah. Okay, here's the Mishnah for chapter 3, beginning chapter 3 of the Mishnah. HaKoreh et HaMegillah omed v'yoshev. The one who reads the Megillah can stand or can sit. Let's see. No, I want the notes. What's the halacha here? The Megillah may be read either standing or sitting. However, the blessing must be recited while standing. Still, when one reads in public, he should read standing out of deference to the honor of the congregation. Some say that the congregation can forego its honor and allow the reader to sit. And I guess that would be okay, especially if the reader had a hard time standing. But yes, otherwise today the custom is that the reader stands while you read the Megillah. Whether one okay, so that's the so you can but you can see here there's a leniency because with Torah it's going to be different. Kra'ah echad, kra'uhu shnayim yatz'u. This is an interesting halacha. Whether one reads the Megillah, one person reads the Megillah or two people read it together, they fulfill the obligation. This is usually an issue because when two people read, it's hard to know if you are using those readers to exempt your obligation of whatever the particular mitzvah is. It gets very confusing if there's two people, you don't know who you're listening to. So, but here they're saying that the Megillah can be read by two people, and we'll see that probably has to do just to distinguish it from reading Torah, that it's not as significant as Torah.
That means
Is the idea here that they're reading simultaneously?
I guess it is. I mean, I was trying to
Not
think of
breaking it up in segments and
like what?
alternating, something like
Yeah, I
that.
mean, I guess no, they're reading it. That's what it means. So they're reading it simultaneously.
Oh, okay.
Because and he even puts in the note here, they read it together. And I mean that in his interpretation. And I was trying to think, like, why would you ever have two people reading at the same time? But
We sing together.
yeah, you sing together, I guess. I mean, I can think of it in modern times because if you have a lot of people have been practicing, you want to give everybody an opportunity to do the reading, but you're not going to have, read the Megillah different 3 or 4 times through. So you get, or maybe two people learned a chapter and you want them to both be able to read it. I mean, I could see, but I was trying to think, why would you have two people read the Megillah at the same time? I mean, simultaneously. But anyway, that's the rule here. Makom shenahagu levarech yivarech v'shalo levarech lo yivarech. In a place where the people are accustomed to recite a blessing over the reading, one should recite a blessing. And if it's customary not to recite a blessing, you don't recite a blessing. Also, a very big difference between, what we're used to with the Torah reading. I mean, if it's a mitzvah to hear the Megillah, you would think there'd be a blessing before it, but I guess some places did not have that custom. Let's see if what the note says here. No, that wasn't it. No, they didn't have a note on it. Okay, all right. Now, B'sheni v'chamishi b'Shabbat b'mincha. Here we're obviously talking about Torah reading. On Monday, Thursday, and Shabbat afternoon, Korin Shlosha, 3 people read. Ein pochatin mehen ve'ein mosifin alehem. You can't have more readers, you can't have nor less readers. It's just 3. Ve'ein maftirin b'navi, and you don't have a concluding reading from the prophetic portion. Hapoteach ve'hachotem b'Torah, the person who opens the Torah reading, the person who concludes the Torah reading, mivarech lefaneha ula acharecha. What this means is that the person who opens the Torah reading says a blessing at the beginning, and person number 3 who reads the last few verses says the blessing afterwards, but no blessings in between. And this is very different, you can see, than what we do within our practice today. Today, before each and every section that we read, there's a blessing, and then there's a blessing that concludes that section. So this is different. In the Mishnaic times, it was just one blessing at the beginning, one blessing at the end, and the reader did that blessing. Okay, so that was again the Torah readings during the week. B'Roshei Chodashim u'v'chulo shel Moed, on Rosh Chodesh, and in the middle days, the intermediate days of a festival, Korin Arba. You have 4. You break the Torah reading up into 4. You get 4 different readers, and again, ein pochatin mehen ve'ein mosifin alehen. You can't have. They don't want you to have more readers. These are usually readings that are done, on work days, and so to add more readers takes up more time, and that's going to be an inconvenience for those who need to get to work. The ein maftirin b'navi. You don't have a closing section from the closing reading from the prophetic section. And the same rule, hapoteach v'achotem b'Torah mivarech lefaneha ula acharecha. The person the opening reader says the initial blessing, the closing reader says the closing blessing. Zehaklal. Here we've got another rule. Kol sheyesh bo musaf ve'eno yom tov. Any day on which there's musaf, but it's not a festival. So that's Rosh Chodesh. That's the intermediate days of the festival. I'm trying to think of other days that might be so. Korin Arba, those are 4. Biyom Tov Chamisha. On a festival day, there are 5. You break up the Torah reading into 5. Yom Kippur at 6, and on Shabbat at 7. Ein pochatin mehen aval mosifin alehen. So with Shabbat, now let's see. I think Shabbat and festivals too, or is it only Shabbat? He says one may add to them. Okay, so it's not clear here what the adding to them, if it's just Shabbat, which some places do, or if it includes Yom Kippur and the festivals, because
the halacha note looks like it's just Shabbat, although it doesn't explicitly say that.
Right. So
wait, no, on a festival it's permitted to increase.
4 people. Let's see. Intermediate one may not, may either. And then on festivals, 2 scrolls are removed from the ark. 5 people read from scroll number 1, and then you have the maftir reading. It's permitted to increase the numbers of readers on a festival. However, some say that should not be done. This is generally accepted. This is generally accepted, but there is an exception. Okay. Yeah, Simchat Torah is definitely an exception. But you see, the reason why I'm asking that question is because it's not clear what the ein pochatin mehen aval mosifin alehen, which is it just the last statement, Shabbat Shiv'ah? Is it Yom Kippur and Yom Tov? Because right above, because there's no distinction here. It also says Korin Arba on Kol sheyesh bo musaf ve'eno yom tov, which is what we just read up here. They said you don't increase the number of readers and you don't do a maftir. So is this last line, this qualification, is it only for Shabbat or is it for everything but the intermediate days and Rosh Chodesh. So here, in the Shulchan Aruch, they're suggesting it refers to Shabbat, Yom Kippur, I assume, and Yom Tov, but not the intermediate days of the festival. And they don't read it tightly. But there must be some who do, because some say that it should not be done. So okay. And we do a maftir, which we certainly do on festivals, Yom Kippur, and of course Shabbat. And here, Hapotech v'achotem b'Torah mivarech lefaneha ula acharecha. And again, the same rule that even on these days, it's just the opening reader says the first blessing, and the closing reader says the closing blessing. Now the Gemara steps in, and Tana Masha Einkin b'Torah. We were talking about the first part of the Mishnah, which was sitting, standing. Both are permitted with the Megillah, Masha Einkin b'Torah, but it's not so with Torah. Torah, you have to be standing. So what's the case? Where do we get this idea from? Amar Rabbi Abahu, the Amar Kra ve'ata po amod imadi. This comes from Deuteronomy. Moses is reviewing the experience of Sinai, the revelation at Sinai. This is 40 years later. And he's saying, but as for you, stand here with me, and I will speak to you all the commandments and the statutes. So therefore, we follow that practice. We stand when the Torah is being read.
I had a question about verse numbering,
Yeah.
because I went looking for the context of that verse.
Mm-hmm.
And I was originally looking at BHS and not finding the verse. And it turns out in BHS, it's verse 31. In the JPS Tanakh, it's verse 28, and here he lists it as verse 27.
So this could be, that's,
So I was just curious.
yeah. So it could be that it's a mistake in his.
Yeah, but still they're inconsistent. So I didn't know. That's
JPS and B.
So
JPS and BHS. I don't know why. I mean, BHS has more verses in the chapter. Same content, it seems to be.
yeah, let's see.
But also it looks to me like the context is not quite what it wants you to say, and what it wants you to think, or the way you described it. Moses is quoting God as saying, tell the Israelites to return to their tents, and you, Moses, stand here while I instruct you, which is quite different from the
bit
way it's
different.
used.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay, you're right. I have the context wrong. This is after. Oh, and that's why there's a distinction. See, it follows the Ten Commandments,
Right.
and it depends on how you delineate the Ten Commandments. The JPS has the last 5 commandments as all. Oh no, 4 of the commandments 6, 7, 8, and 9 as one verse, because of course, remember we have 2 different breakdowns of the 10 commandments.
Yeah, there are 2
Yeah.
versions.
Right. So we've got the public reading versus this, I guess you would call it the study version, where you're just reading it in the text. The public reading, it breaks it down so that there's actually an individual verse for each of the 10 statements.
That may be what BHS has done.
Right. So BHS has done that. So they've broken up those 4, 6 through 9 as individual verses. So that's the reason for the difference in the verse. Now, why he came up with
Well, actually, no, it has 4 of them. You shall not murder, 3 you shall not
right.
false witness as one verse in BHS. So the difference is somewhere else. But we don't need to waste time on that.
All right, that's okay. I'm just looking at the BHS
Oh, no, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
I was looking at, I have the JPS translation
Right.
next to it. You're right.
So,
Okay,
so
so
that's
that's
why
where it comes from.
but why he made it just
He may have made a
made a
mistake.
mistake. It may have just missed the verse. But you're absolutely right.
The
You're right.
combination of those two
Yeah.
left me confused till I Googled and, saw
Yeah.
where
So-
Google said
so-
it was.
But you're right. You're right. The context is return to your. That's what say to them. That's what God says. Okay, go back to your tents. You've heard these 10 commandments, but you remain here with me. So this
Yeah.
is Moses being told, stand here with me, and I will speak to you all the commandments and the statutes.
Well, and it really clearly means remain and not necessarily on your feet for 40 days.
Right.
or something.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But now he didn't eat he neither ate nor drank, right?
Right. Wait, I'm just trying to. Where's the? No, oh, you said it was 531 in the top Amodi. Yeah. Okay. Right. Exactly. Remain with me. So, but they're reading it, again, hyper literally, which is not unusual.
Right.
And
No,
says,
I was curious as to what they had done with it. So
then Rabbi Abahu, V'amar Rabbi Abahu, ilmalei mikra katuv efshar la'omro. If had the Torah not said it exactly, it would be impossible to utter it because it's as if the Holy One was standing at the giving of Torah, because he says, stand with me, right? And which seems like, wait a minute, shouldn't God be, God's the king. The king sits while the lesser individual stands before him. But it sounds like Amodi Madi, so stand with me. But that's why he's kind of apologizing for his hyper literal reading, because but he said, if it wasn't written that way in the Torah, I wouldn't be able to say that. Then he also continues with another halacha about, again, this is very interesting because it's like he's contemporizing this. He's saying what contemporary halacha, besides reading Torah, what other lesson do we learn from this experience where God is saying to Moses, stand with me while I give you the rest of the Torah? And he says, Minayin l'rav shelo yeshev al gabei mita v'yashneh l'talmido al gabei karka. Where do we learn that the teacher shouldn't stand over or be in a position of, it's interesting, a hierarchical position when he's teaching? Because the teacher shouldn't be on a couch when the student is sitting on the ground. And the answer is, but as for you, Ve'ata po amod imadi. Teacher and the student should be in the same position. There's the same, what's the word I'm looking for? The same status, in a sense, when they're teaching, when the teacher is teaching. So interestingly, he's learning that from this statement where it seems like God and Moses are in the same position. They're both standing. But it's an important lesson for how the teacher should be careful about how he stands. I mean, how he presents himself when he teaches. And here the halacha, is this the halacha? Yeah. Teacher should not sit on a chair while the students are sitting on the ground. This teacher and students should all be sitting on chairs or sitting on the ground. And then they have some qualifications. Okay, but I like that idea. It's very important. Rabbi Abahu is very sensitive to how the teacher is presenting him or herself when they teach, and learning it from this verse. Okay, so Tanu Rabbanan, sages taught. Mimot Moshe ve'ad Rabban Gamliel lo hayu lemedim Torah ela umad. So now we find out this was the way they usually would study Torah. They would stand. But Misha made Rabban Gamliel yarad choli leolam v'hayu lemedim Torah miyushav. In the good old days when people studied Torah, they were tough. They stood at attention, proper respect for Torah. But when Rabbi Gamliel died, weakness, sickness, the people were just ill. Yeah, I guess weakness is a good way to translate. I mean, to be a whole is sickness. So descended into the world, and they couldn't stand anymore. So they sat down. Not like the good old days. V'hainu d'tanan misha meit Rabban Gamliel batel kavod Torah, and this goes to a teaching in the section known as Sota, that when Rabban Gamliel died, honor of the Torah ceased, and we should feel bad about that. Okay. Katuv echad omer ve'eshev bahar. Now wait a minute. We got a couple of different, but we got some contradictions here. There's a verse that says, Ve'eshev bahar, right? I sat on the mount. That was in Deuteronomy 9. But the next chapter says, Vanochi amarati bahar. I stood on the mount. So wait a minute. Was Moses sitting or standing? Amarav, omeid vilomeid yoshev vishoneh. So according to Rav, Moshe would stand when he learned from God. But then when it came time to review the material, he would sit and review it. Now, Rabbi Chanina understood the contradictions this way. Lo omeid velo yoshev ela shocheh. That he was kind of in between. He was bowing out of a sign of respect, but rather bowing, an expression of honor for the divine presence. Although that would have been really hard to do that for a long period of time. Rabbi Yochanan Omer, Ein yeshiva ela lashon akava, shene'amar v'teshvu bekadesh yamim rabim. He says akava here is translated here as tarrying, to tarry. So that when it says he was ve'eshev bahar, just mean I was there. I was like dwelling on the mountain for all those days. So he doesn't really literally mean he was sitting. Whereas Rava explained the differences as rakot me'umad v'kashot miyushav. The easier stuff to integrate, the easier material, that he would stand for. But the really hard stuff, that he had to sit down and really focus, I guess. Kra'a echad, kra'uhu shnaim yatsu. We learned in the Mishnah, if one person reads the Megillah or two people read it together, you're what they call yotze. You've fulfilled your obligation. Tana masha ein kein b'Torah. Well, that's true about the Megillah, but not about the Torah. The Torah can only be read by one person at a time. Tanu Rabbanan b'Torah echad korei ve'echad mitargem uvilvad shelo yehe echad korei ushnai mitargamin. Okay, so there's a baraita that teaches when reading from the Torah, one person reads and one translates the reading into Aramaic. This is how they used to do it. They didn't have books. So, and I think if I remember correctly, one suggestion is they would read verse by verse. So you would read a verse and then the translator would translate it into Aramaic. So you could have one person reading, one person translating.
You occasionally hear someone do that now, except the translations into English. Well,
Right.
one person, the person reading.
The person reading translates?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, we've heard
I've heard
people
that.
do that.
Because they don't have books in front of them, or they just want to
Or
translate
they
it?
prefer it. I mean, you can give a slant to your.
Sure.
You don't necessarily have to translate it identically. I mean, it's not that common, but we've seen that done.
Okay. Well, I just always think that, I was thinking, boy, that would be a very long Torah reading.
Well, this is Reformed congregations where it's not such a
yeah.
such a long Torah reading.
It
So
might be only a few verses.
Right. Well, here I'm saying that, but in the Talmudic period, unless now we do know that there was a Palestinian custom where they wouldn't finish the entire Torah in a year. It would take 3.5 years.
there's still places that I guess have a
That go on
3-year
a triennial
cycle.
cycle.
Right. That's a little bit different. That's kind of arbitrary thing. I shouldn't say arbitrary because it's a fixed cycle, but it's based on that idea. But that's not what the Palestinians did. They would do is they would read consecutively over
Okay.
3.5 years, as
And
opposed to
not split the portion into 3 parts.
right,
The
exactly.
way triennial.
Mhm.
So they would, and we know this because I think it was Joseph Mann who pointed. He had the actual what the maftir, the prophetic portion for each of those portions was. So it would take him 3.5 years. So then I could see, yeah, I guess if it was less Torah reading, it wouldn't be as long. Otherwise, I
Yeah,
mean,
but if you're doing something like 10 or 12 verses, it's
yeah,
It's not
that's
so.
different from what you do on Saturdays.
right. With me,
Yeah.
I mean, people would be throwing things at me if I started translating one verse at a time and
Yeah.
reading the 7 sections. Okay.
And well, it's not Torah, but certainly heard Michael Signer do that, reading Jonah on
Oh, he would read and then
Yom
translate?
Kippur.
Yeah,
No, I heard him do that with Torah, with the Akedah, I think. I heard him.
oh, okay.
You
That
know,
could be,
do
yeah,
it
very dramatic.
where he was sort of adding a little about, involving
Interpretation.
interpretation.
Yeah. All right, and then and here says here, and the rule about reading the Navi, the prophetic section, one person reads and 2 may translate, as there is less of a need to ensure that everyone hears the precise translation, as the prophets do not teach halakha. I still don't understand how I'm trying to think the reality of it. It's like listening to 2 people speaking at the same time. That's just confusing to me. This is the case provided there are not 2 people. Wait,
Aren't
2 people
aren't-
reading and 2 people translating.
aren't they rejecting some from their time back?
Yeah, I mean, I don't
So I'm
know. I'm just trying
not
to figure.
inclined.
I mean, I think partly this is to show the difference between Torah and any other scripture.
Yeah, yeah.
That Torah, you have to hear the one reader or the one translator to understand it properly. Now, he says here it's about teaching halakha. I would think that it's also the significance of the text. So therefore, with the prophets, you could have 2 people translating, but you can't have 2 people reading it at the same time, but you could have 2 people translating it. But I'm just trying to think, like, why would anybody want?
But they were living in an era with Greek influence. And if you think about some of the classic Greek plays where you have a chorus and they're all
that's
speaking at
interesting.
once.
Okay,
So I don't know if that
maybe,
just occurred to me, but
yeah, that could be. Maybe that's part of it. Yeah, or maybe obviously they don't have microphones, so maybe it's like remember that thing that they had Occupy Wall Street? There would be like one person would say whatever's being said, and then people would repeat it or something like that. It was like the people in the back would repeat it so that everybody could hear it all the way back, something like that. I don't know. Maybe it was. I don't know. It's very interesting though that. But the main thing clearly is that this is different. Torah is different from the prophets, and Hallel and Megillah are different from even the prophets, because you can even 10 people may read and 10 people may translate at the same time. Now let's just see what they got little notes here. Yeah, it just tells you that it's okay. I'm just trying to. Okay. Well, it says here with the reading of Megillah, the custom is only one person to read aloud for the community. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. So what is the reason? Oh, so here's an interesting explanation that the Gemara offers us, which is why that would have been possible, or why they would have done it in the first place. Maitama, kevan de chaviva. The Megillah can be read by several people at once simultaneously, because Yahavi datai. Oh, dechaviva, rather. Kevan dechaviva, because it's so beloved. And therefore they'll pay attention to it and hear it. and they're not going to be distracted by the different voices. I think that's a really odd response. Let's see if he's got notes down here.
Doesn't that have the implication that maybe they don't always pay attention to the Torah?
Yeah, well, that's the Ron and others explain that one will listen carefully and discern one of the voices. Alternatively, one will listen carefully to all the voices together rather than to one particular voice. I just think that's wait. I mean, you saying that Torah isn't cherished, and so therefore people aren't going to pay attention to it. I just think that's a very odd response. But it is, yeah. So it's just kind of interesting why Megillah. I don't know. Maybe because, well, it is. I don't know if Chavivah is the word translated here as cherished, but it could be that, it's a story. So it's a little easier to follow even if there were more than one person reading at the same time. It's a little easier to follow along what's going on. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, and so you're listening to the narrative as opposed to Torah.
People also know the story, and
the story, right?
And I do not know the details of the construction of the tabernacle, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you would you would start to fade out. I mean, there's obviously the narrative portions of Torah are different, but much of the Torah isn't that way. So, all right. So that's just kind of curious. Mekom shenahagu levarech yivarech. Amar Abai, lo shanu ela le'acharecha, aval lefaneha mitzvah levarech. So the Mishnah told us that in a place where the people are accustomed to recite a blessing, this is the Megillah, you should recite a blessing, and where you're not accustomed, you don't have to recite a blessing. And Abai says that's only referring to the after blessing. But as for the blessing that is recited before, there is a mitzvah to recite it. As Rav Yehuda said, that Shmuel said, with regard to all the mitzvot, one recites a blessing over them prior to their mitzvah, prior to their performance. And the phrase is over la'asiyatan. So that's the explanation given why we always say the blessing before we're about to do it. You say the blessing, well, there's other reasons given for why we say the blessing before we light candles on Shabbat, but that is the custom. We say the blessing before we light the candles. So we say the blessing of the lulav and etrog before we actually do the action of the lulav and etrog. That's why we pick up the etrog actually upside down, because you want to be holding it when you say the blessing, and then you just turn the etrog right side up to observe the mitzvah properly. So that's the over la'asiyatan. So we say blessings over la'asiyatan prior to the performance. I just wanted to look here. What was I questioning or wondering about? They taught to do. Oh, if he was going to explain the halacha here, because it's interesting. No, I didn't. Blessing, here it is. Before the Megillah is read at night, 3 blessings are recited, of course. The reading of the Megillah, the miracle, the one on miracles, and the Shehechianu. However, the custom in Ashkenazi communities is to recite this. Oh, blessing during the day as well. That's not what I was looking for. After the reading of the Megillah, it is customary nowadays for each individual to recite the blessings who pleads our cause. That's very interesting. In some texts, it will tell you only recite the after blessing of the reading of the Megillah if there is a minyan. If there's no minyan, then you don't recite the blessing after the reading of the Megillah. So here it doesn't really clarify that. It says for each individual to recite the blessing. Okay. Maybe the text that I was reading was not clear. Maybe it was that you only say it out loud, publicly in a public reading with the minyan, but less than that everybody says it to themselves. Anyway, okay, so you definitely say the blessings before, but there's some question whether you have to say the blessings after or how it's recited. My mashma dahai over lishana de aktume hu. Where do we get the idea that the concept of over means prior to? So then we have some verses that explain that. From 2 Samuel, we have an Achimaaz ran by the way of the plain and overran via Avor, the Cushite. He got ahead of the Cushite. He overtook the Cushite. Abai said it is derived from here in Genesis. Vilhu avar lifnehem. What is that? That must have been about, I think that was about Lavan. And if you wish, you can say the proof is from Micah, V'ya'avor malkam lifnehem varanai berosham. And their king passed before them, the Lord at their head. Okay, so we've got some proof text of how you can use the term avor, la'avor, as to get in front of. Lifaneha my mivarech, Rav Sheshet mikat razia. Ikla lekame de Rav Ashi. He came to the house of Rav Ashi, uvarech mem nun chet, manach. It's a mnemonic device to remind us mikra al hamigila. On the miracle, the same one we recite at Hanukkah, on the Nisim, which I can't remember at the moment. And the last one is Shehechianu. So those are the three blessings. So two of them are similar to the Hanukkah, and then one is a specific on the Mikra Megillah. Le'acharecha my mivrech. So if the after blessing, what's that? And here it is. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam harav et rivenu, who he translates here as pleads our cause. To rivenu is our literally our I guess that's how Riv is an argument to our case, who argues our case. Dan et dinenu, who judges our claims. V'hanokim et nikmatenu, who avenges us, avenges our vengeance. V'nifra lanu mitzarenu, pays back or punishes our foes, our enemies, mitzarenu. V'ameshalem gimul lechol oivei nafshenu, and exacts retribution, gets payback from all of our oivim, our enemies. Literally, oivei nafshenu, the enemies of our souls. Baruch atah Hashem, hanifra liYisrael mikol tzarehem. Praise are you, Lord, who he translates here as exacts payment on behalf of Israel from all of our enemies. So you see, the last blessing is pretty tough. It's pretty it's a blessing of revenge, on vengeance. Rava Amar, it should say, the conclusion should say not Hanifra Yisrael, who exacts punishment on the enemies of Israel, but rather Ha'el HaMoshia, the saving God, who brings salvation, the God who brings salvation. Amar Rav Papa Hilchach Nam Rinhu Letarvaihu. He said, you know what? Let's use both. So it ends, blessed are you, Lord our God, who on behalf of Israel exacts punishment from all the foes and brings salvation. Now he says here, one may not conclude a blessing with two themes. However, in this case, the two phrases complement each other and are considered one theme. So that's the issue. That's why they were arguing which one. Well, they could have said it from the beginning, we'll just use them together. But there's a concern that the chatima, the closing blessing, has to be the focus of the blessing. So here the argument is, well, both are the same. There's two sides of the same coin. Exacting punishment from your enemies is the same thing as bringing salvation. Okay, so that's the blessing afterwards. B'shenu v'chamishi, b'shabbat v'mincha korin shlosha. On Monday, Thursday, and Shabbat afternoon, we read a Torah portion. Usually now that's the first Aliyah of the week, and it's three separate readings. Hane shlosha keneged mi. Why three? What are they referred to, or what are they corresponding to. Amar Rav Asi, Keneged Torah Nevi'im Uchtuvim. So it's the three parts of the Tanakh. Rava Amar Keneged Kohanim Levi'im Yisraelim. It's the three types of the three groups, the hierarchy, or the three statuses within Israel: Kohanim, Levi'im, and Israelites. Elahad Tane Rav Simi. The Gemara raises a question. What about this teaching of Rav Shimi? Ein pochatin me asara psukim beveit haKnesset. You can't read less than 10 verses in the Beit HaKnesset. So during a public Torah reading in the synagogue, I don't think I finished his teaching. Vayidaber olam min haminyan, hane asara keneged mi. So the when you have to read 10 verses. So now we got 3 readings on those days, but you got to read at least 10 verses out of those 3. And any verse that says something as short as God spoke to Moses, that is included in one of the 10. So what do the 10 verses correspond to? Okay. Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Keneged Asara Batlanim Shebeveit HaKnesset. They correspond to those 10 batlanim. We learned that in Tanit. There's these 10. He translates it as idlers, but that sounds like they're like just homeless people who have nothing else to do. They're not. They're actually very significant individuals in the community. They're people who are wealthy enough they don't have to work, or they have other people working for them. They might be retirees, but they're 10 significant people who take major roles in the community. They're always there in the synagogue, so you never are without a minyan. They study Torah all day, so they're doing something sacred in the community. They're taking on communal responsibilities. So that those 10 verses, in a sense, correspond or perhaps even honor these 10 individuals. Rav Yosef said no, it's Keneged Aseret HaDibrot. It's they correspond to the 10 commandments. Rabbi Levi Amar Keneged Asara Hilulim she'amar David b'Sefer Tehillim. They correspond to the 10 Psalms of praise that David said in the book of Psalms. So there's 10 Psalms that begin Tehillah le David, and so that it corresponds to that. And Rabbi Yochanan Amar Keneged Asara Ma'amarot shebahen nivra ha'olam, the 10 statements of with which the world was created. And here he says the commentaries disagree as to which verses are included in this count, but all agree that the verse in the beginning is inclusive of the entire creation. So and then we'll get to that in a second. I just wanted to say that so there's 10 times or a number of times that in the creation story where it says it's Vayo. Is it Vayomer or not? Vayigeda? Tells my brain. Let's just look at this. Okay, Vayomer Elohim. That's okay. All right. Anyway, there are a number of times when it says Vayomer Elohim as God is creating the world, and it says here, Hey Ninhu. What are these 10 utterances? Vayomer de Bereshit. It says Vayomer Elohim a number of times, but they say, wait a minute, there's only 9. Hane Tisha Havu. Bereshit nami ma'amarhu. That opening line of Bereshit bara Elohim, that counts as one of the 10 utterances that created the world. Dichtiv bidvar Adonai shamayim na'asu uveruach piv kol tziva'am. We have this verse in Psalms, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. Okay. Amar Rava, Rishon, I wanted to look at this, that halacha. 10 verses. On a day when 3 readers are called to the Torah, they must read a minimum of 10 verses in total. However, if the entire topic being read is concluded in fewer than 10 verses, such as the war against Amalek, that's sufficient. And that's what we have today. That's our custom, that we only read 9 on Purim. The verses about Amalek in Exodus, we only read the 9 verses. I'm pretty sure that's the only case where we have less than 10 verses. Okay, so it says 10 verses have to be read. Rishon kara arba mishubach, sheni shekara arba mishubach, shlishi shekara arba mishubach. Whoever gets the 4 verses, that's praiseworthy. It's just which of the 3. So now they're going to go through each of these cases to show what is mishubach, what's praiseworthy about the first, second, or third reader getting to read the 4. So Rishon shekara arba mishubach, in the case of where the first reader reads 4 verses, is praiseworthy. That comes from this idea, bishlosha kupot shel shalosh sa'im shebahen tormim et halishka. This is from a passage in Shkalim. One removes the funds from the temple treasury chamber in order to use them for purchasing communal offerings and attending to other needs of the temple, with 3 large baskets, each measuring 3 seah. That's an amount. On the baskets, it is written 1, 2, and 3, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, in order to know which of them was removed first, and in order to sacrifice offerings purchased with the money from that basket first, as it is a mitzvah to use the money collected with the first basket before the money collected with the others. So therefore, in that case, the first basket is used first, and therefore that's the more praiseworthy, or it's praiseworthy to be first reader to have the most verses because of that. Okay, what about the middle position? What if the middle guy reads 4 verses, and that's the most praiseworthy? Where do we get the idea there? Well, the Tanya El Mul Pnei HaMenorah Ya'iru. 7 lamps, the 7 lamps of the menorah shall give light in front of the candelabrum, in front of the menorah. This teaches that the priest turns the front of each lamp toward the western lamp, that is the one in the middle, and the western lamp toward the divine presence. So here you got a little picture on the side there. You see how they're lamps, they're like those Aladdin lamp kind of things, and they each, the patil, what do you call it? The wick. The wick is facing the middle, and each side is facing the middle branch, and the middle branch goes straight up. So therefore, it is derived from here that the middle one is especially praiseworthy. What about if you're the last reader and you get 4? Why is that the most praiseworthy? Mishum ma'alin b'kodesh v'lo moridin. Because we all, that's the general principle. We rise in holiness, we don't go down in holiness. That's, why we light 1 additional candle on Hanukkah every day, because we're going up in holiness. More candles, more holiness. If the last reader reads more verses than the first 2, this is an elevation in sanctity. Now, the Gemara relates that Rav Papa happened to come to the synagogue in a place called Avi Gover, and the first person called to the Torah read 4 verses, and Rav Papa praised him. Let's see, where does it say? Where's the Rav? What do we learn about that? Rav Papa agreed that it is acceptable for any of the 3 readers to read 4 verses. He praised the first reader because he took the initiative to read 4 verses and thereby demonstrated his zeal to perform mitzvot. Okay, now today, of course, where it's fixed, you've got it in your prayer book or in the Chumash. It tells you which how many verses you should be reading for each of the 3 readings. Ein pochatin mehen ve'ein mosifin. We learned in the Mishnah that one may not decrease the number of readers nor add to them. The one who begins reading and the one who concludes the reading from the Torah each recite a blessing. It is taught in the Baraita, Hapotech mevorech lefanecha, V'hachotem mivarech le'acharecha. The one who opens the reading, the first reader, blesses before the Torah reading, and the concluding reader reads the concluding blessing. But then, see, even in the time of the Talmud, this practice has been changed. V'ha'idna dekulhu mevarchi lefanecha ule'acharecha. And now all who read from the Torah recite blessings both before and after reading from the Torah. This is the reason that the sages instituted the policy. And it's because of this situation, again, where the concern a person entering late or early, missing one of the blessings is going to get confused. It's a decree, Gezerah mishum hanichnasim umishum hayotzim. Due to both who enter the synagogue in the middle of the reading and don't hear the first reader's initial blessing, and due to those who leave the synagogue before the reading is over and don't hear the final reader's concluding blessing. They'll come to an erroneous conclusion about the blessings. They'll say, oh, you just need to say the blessing at the end or the blessing at the beginning. So according to the Talmud, therefore now we do the blessing before and after each section is recited. This is also one of these things that I also get confused about. I mean, why would you, does that mean the person never is in the synagogue for the whole reading? It's just that one time he walks out, he'll think that that's the one time they don't read the blessings after. So I've never, that always seemed a strange explanation to me. And I wonder, see that the Torah reading, the public recitation of the Torah is an interesting mitzvah because it's not a mitzvah on any one individual. Like I'm not obligated to hear Torah on Monday, Thursday, even on Shabbat. Like if I don't hear it, it's not like I haven't fulfilled a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah for the community. The community is supposed to hear the mitzvah. So I wonder if it's not having to do with that if a person were to leave early or to come in late, then it's like the community, the constituted community at that moment hasn't heard the entire reading, beginning through the end, which includes the bracha for that reading. Whereas if you come in late and you just hear the third reading, on that, and it goes for Shabbat as well, it's important for you to hear a blessing before the recitation and be part of the community that's hearing the blessing after the recitation. Anyway, that because whenever these explanations about those who enter and leave, it always just seems a little bit weird to me. Like, okay, so the guy walked out.
That may have been an explanation after the fact. The custom may have developed, and
right, exactly.
And then you needed to explain it.
Exactly. Is this? Yeah, I want to. So we're just going to read the opening of this longer argument now, because they do have an issue. But Roshei Chodashim u'Chulo shel Moed Korin Arba'a. So you have 4 readers on, let's say, Rosh Chodesh. Ba'amine Ula bar Rav me Rava. So Ula bar Rav raised a dilemma before Rava. The Torah portion on the new moon consists of 3 short consecutive paragraphs. And you can see here it's 1 through 8, and then 9 and 10 talks about Shabbat. It's a very short portion. And then 11-15 is all about Rosh Chodesh. 1 through 8 is about the daily offering. So how do you break that up? Because now you have a little bit of a conflict. You got to read at least 10 verses. You have to have at least each reader, and there's 4 readers, have to each read at least 3 verses. And you can't end a reading in the middle of a section of a context. So how does one read it in order to divide it among 4 readers? With regard to the first paragraph, which includes the verse, command the children of Israel and say to them, my offering, the provision of my sacrifices made by fire. And it's 8 verses. What should we do? Because you're going to get stuck with these 2 verses. So we're going to talk about that. We'll pick that up next week as they come in with different solutions. And eventually, the solution we have today, which is you read one of the verses twice to break it up so that you can include, you break up that 1 through 8 into 2 parts, but in such a way that you read one of the verses twice, and then you go from the middle of 1 through 8 all the way through 10. But we'll pick that up next week. Okay. I don't know if anybody has any questions about this week's section.
It seems to me that as far as the translation, that we don't have to do it anymore because now we have a Chumash. It's like one of those traditions that we have built a structure, excuse me, around, so we don't have to translate it because everybody can just, now that literacy is more common and we can print the Chumash, we don't have to translate because here it is in English. And then with the 2 readers, it kind of had an air of a pilot co-pilot in case this guy like drops dead or something, or like loses his voice halfway through.
Maybe,
We have this backup plan, now that we've started it and we've already now that we've made all these rules and we're already in this situation, how do we get out of it sort of thing. So it kind of seemed to me like it was more of if he loses his voice or drops or something, like somebody can step in and finish, and
maybe that's
we can
it. I
get the mitzvah.
Yeah. I have to,
there's that. And the showing up late thing is, I don't know, pragmatic, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, very good. All right. Well, we'll pick it up next week, and we're getting pretty close to Purim itself. So now that you're all experts at, learned in the commentary of the Book of Esther, you can add that to your reading pleasure and your reading understanding. We do have actually these new books that we'll be using this year from the Rabbinical Assembly, which has a really nice commentary, and not only nice commentary on parts of the Book of Esther, but it has 2 translations. Here we had 2 translators. Here we've got 2 translations. There's the literal, or the traditional JPS translation, trying to get the understanding of the verse, and then there's a colloquial translation, just trying to explain what's going on in more of a narrative fashion. So a lot of material to look at. So I'm excited about these new.
Who did the commentary?
Well, it's a bunch of, there's Rabbi Martin Cohen is the one who did most of it. Oh, also Dr. Pamela Barmash. And then there's a bunch of other individuals who shared comments that they included. So there's a lot of different comments in it. It's might make it a little more challenging to read through it because you got to skip through a bunch of pages to get to the next chapter, but that's okay. We break up the chapters here anyway. Okay. All right. Very good. Everybody have a good week.
Thank you.
We'll see ya. Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good day.